Good morning, good morning. How's everybody? Hey. 4. Good morning. There you go. Good morning, everybody. How's it going? Let's go ahead and get on our feet this morning. Let's bow our heads real quick and close our eyes and just invite God's presence in this place. God, we just thank you so much for each opportunity we get to come together. We just ask that you would help us be right here, right now, that you would strip away all the stuff from yesterday, from today, tomorrow, just that our minds would be right here, right now, that we would just worship you and spend time with each other, God, and just be fully present today. So we ask for your presence in this place, and the eyes and the ears to see and to hear your presence this morning. So we love you, God, and we thank you. It's in your Son's name we do all these things, God. Amen. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yes, that is who you are. 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 Yes, that is who you are. 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 You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. you never stop working, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. That is who you are. Yes, that is who you are. 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 Yes, that is who you are. Yes, that is who you are. That is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look in the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. So my day living dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things of this world. 'Cause I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding, boy, if I was set me free, is no other name but the name that is Jesus.
No other name.
He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all the things unseen in this reckoning. So I know I will never be alone. 'Cause I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the streams. And should I ever need reminding of how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Amen. God, we thank you so much for today. You're such an awesome God. We don't always grasp that fully, God. And we just ask that you would teach us to grasp that, how awesome you are, and what you did for us, how important that was, what you did on the cross. And so today, as we continue to worship, Father, that we would just come in this place and we would be genuine and real, and that we would bring our gifts and our fruits for you, that we would bring them to the altar, God, and that it wouldn't be about us doing something to get something, but it would be doing something because we love you. It would be a sacrifice because that's what love is. That's what it looks like. It's not comfortable. Teach us to walk in that uncomfortable love that you walked in, God, for us. We love you so much. We thank you so much. Amen. You give light, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. You only. Great I love. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. You only, it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. You only. and all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
Are you,
Lord.
oh, we sing great. Are you, Lord? Oh, we sing great. Are you, Lord? We sing great. Are you, Lord? Great are you, Lord. We sing great. Are you, Lord? It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
Good morning. They're alive. Everybody up there. About these Kingdom kids coming up every week and coming up worshiping with us. And hey, they're ahead of where I was at that age. They know this thing's an altar and they've been to the front already. It was a long time before I knew you could come to the altar without something major happening. That's for sure. But any guess where we're going to be this morning in the Word? Anybody? Philippians. Anybody get us guess how far we're going to move from we did last week? 'Cause that was a long time for half a verse. Guess what? We're still there. For those of y'all that hadn't been in a while, you've been listening on the radio, we've been in a series of in Philippians and going through the book. And I say going through the book, we've been going through the chapter of our chapter 1. But man, it sure is good to just sit every once in a while and just kind of be in a place where you can kind of get something. There was a joke I heard a long time ago. This pastor, some old Baptist church, it was up north in Indiana or somewhere. Man, he preached the same message, and one of his parishioners at the back door met him. And, you know, the place where y'all usually say, hey, you got on my toes, but really we were on our own toes. Y'all just happened to have been here. But anyway, in the back, he said, man, when are you going to quit preaching that message? He said, probably when y'all get it. But, so, no, we're going to be right there again. We're going to finish up verse 1, chapter 1, verse 21 today. But, so there was a guy, his name is Andrew Chong. He was a beloved doctor. He was an elder in his church, and he was in surgery as a patient and not as a doctor. And the doctor during surgery, he came out and he met with the family and he said, hey, there's nothing I can do. Y'all are encouraged to go in, say goodbye. When the family went in, Dr. Chong couldn't speak. He was in such great pain, but he motioned for a pen and paper. With trembling hands, he wrote the word "for." Everyone knew what he was writing, but they waited. It took him a while, but word by word he wrote, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." By the time he finished, the whole room was filled with joy. Another story of a guy named Horatio Spafford, whose 4 daughters were drowned on a ship in the Atlantic Ocean. His wife telegraphed, that was so long ago, they had to telegraph, and she said simply, "Saved alone." So he boards a ship and he goes to meet his wife. When they came to the place where the wreck was, the captain called him up and said, "I don't know if you want to know or not, but according to my charts, this is right where the wreck happened." So he returned to his room and he wrote these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows row, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to know, it is well with my soul." Y'all heard that song? Tim Keller, one of our generation's most winsome witnesses for Christ. He's a founder pastor of Redeemer Church in New York City. I can't imagine a harder place to start a church. Author of multiple books, including several that are used as textbooks in Bible colleges. Well, he died here recently back in May, and his sons tell that his last words were, "There is no downside for me leaving, not in the slightest. See you all soon." It would be pretty easy for us to sit and think, well, these were great men, these were great Christians, these were super Christians, if you will. But I ask you, what kind of perspective do you have about death? Is there a way that we can look as death as simply the door to destiny? See, Paul writes in Philippians 1:21, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." We spent last week looking at the first part of that verse, and we will study the second part this morning. Seeing last week we looked at the reasons for Paul's joy. We looked for the reasons in Paul's confidence, his hope. Remember the ultimate aim. When I asked each of you, what was your ultimate aim for life? But when he wrote that death is gain, he triggered an inner struggle in his soul over what would be the best outcome for Paul at this time. As I remind you, Paul's writing from prison, right? He's most likely shackled to a guard. It's not like he's in a cell where he can just move around and do these things, but he's still writing. And when he's going, and he's struggling when he starts into this next section of chapter 1, because see, if he's set free and lives, remember we talked that means his work isn't done there on earth, that he will continue to plant churches, that he's going to continue to share Christ. But for the second part, if he's executed, then he'll get to be where he most wanted to be, with Christ in glory. See, I find it pretty interesting that he's confused about the choice, because Paul really doesn't have a say in this matter. The same as each and every one of us don't have the say in when we're going to live, when we're going to die. God hadn't let him in on what was going to happen to him. One of the greatest men in the Bible didn't know God's plan. You ever had to sit and wonder what God was doing for your life? When the next time you were going to hear some direction? But what he writes and what he says in there within this personal struggle is what would his personal preference be? See, he was torn between two options in a sense. It's a picture of being pressed in a huge crowd or walking through a very narrow canyon. So I think his brain hurt thinking about it. What is his desire? What does he desire? He's in there. He's struggling within his own mind of where am I going with this? tells me it's okay to struggle with what's God got for our life, but it also tells me that it's okay because the rest of chapter 1, he goes on to say some things in there, and we'll get to that towards the end, but I think it's okay for us to have a desired purpose for our life as long as we're listening to the Lord and we listen to where he's going to guide us. It's okay to say, Lord, I really want to go this way. Lord, I really think I need to do this. It's okay because you may be listening and you may have heard that's where you're supposed to be. But just as a reminder, when he does set something in front of you that's not that course and it's not that plan, that's okay too. See, he desired to depart. He desired to be with Christ, which is better by far than anything of this world. But really, Paul starts to see within this chapter that it's more necessary for the world that he remained in the body. His great longing is to depart and be with Christ. The word desire is a strong one, right? The desire means not just more than what you think. It's not just what you want. I've started over on a new diet again. Funny that. Y'all have heard that for 6 years, but here I am. Colton inspires me. He's got to sit over there because that wingspan, when he's in worship, there ain't no more room. The desire to want something, a strong, intense yearning. But think about the word depart. Where do you hear the word depart? Sailors, they use the word depart when they pull up anchor and head out. The Roman army back in the day, when they would set up camp at night, man, it was a big deal. They would dig a moat sometimes. They'd build a 10-foot wall. It was a big, big thing for them to camp at night, and in the morning for them to depart, they had to put all that back together the way they found it. So for them to depart was a big thing. It's an action. It's not just leaving. It's whatever. But we put this all in another way. Paul was homesick. He didn't understand how people could be so preoccupied with this life, but Paul knew that he would leave his earthly tent and he would depart to be with Christ. C.S. Lewis, definitely one of my favorite authors and guys that wrote, and just a man for the Lord, but he wrote this one time, and I've had this, another thing that I've had in some notes for a long time. He said, we are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, and when infinite joy is offered us, like ignorant children who want to go on making mud pies in a slum because we cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a vacation at the beach. We are far too easily pleased. I think about that when Paul wrote in there, when he talks about things like in 2 Corinthians 5:8, when he says to be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord. We're talking about two different places, to live and to die. See, many might think when Paul's wish to die, when Paul's wish to go forward with heaven, or when any of us really get to a point where we're like, just come, Lord. Not suicidal. Paul wasn't suicidal, but many in the world would think that that's being suicidal, to want to leave this earth, to go to something better. The reason we know Paul wasn't demented or sick or anything in this thought process is that he knew that if he was still on earth, God had work for him to do. But he comes back down to earth and realizes that it's more necessary for the Philippians that he remains here on earth for a little while longer. He writes, and I think it's verse 25. It's not going to get up on the screen because we'll read it at the end, but says, convinced of this, I know that I will remain. I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith, so that through my being with you again, your boasting in Christ Jesus will abound on account of me. He doesn't write on account of me to say that I'm the one that's going to do this, just the same as each and every one of us we can't do anything, can we? Anybody in this room powerful enough to go save the guy sitting next to you, to go get somebody to do this, to heal this, to do that? No, but we can all pray for it. We can be part of it. No different than the Apostle Paul sits right here and says, I'm going to go be part of this. He wants them to know that I'm going to stay, as the Philippians would read this letter. He's firmly convinced that he's going to stay. He doesn't have any inside information about his trial. He doesn't know for a fact that he'll be freed. And I know he doesn't know, and I know that in this time God hasn't spoke to him, because in chapter 2 he still writes that he could be executed. This is just what he would choose if he were in charge. As strongly as Paul wants to go forth at this time, and I can't imagine sitting in that kind of prison, having that kind of faith, having those things happen, to continue to still work and go and think about what's going to happen if I am freed. Maybe we all get to a point where we're like, it'd be better to die and go be with Christ. But the reason that he decides that this is what I would choose is because Paul simply figures out it's not about him. He's ready to postpone heaven to help these believers grow more. As he imitates Christ, he calls them to imitate him in selfless service. Those Philippians, those he's going to help. His main focus is not on himself or his desires, but on the progress in his faith. Their faith. The faith. He has more to teach, and they have more to learn. That process would lead to joy, because real discipleship should always lead to joy. Real discipleship shouldn't lead to guilt. Real discipleship shouldn't lead to shame. Real discipleship shouldn't mean to calling out names and accusing or anything else. It should lead to joy. Kind of reminds me of, man, I can't stand to be around a miserable Christian. There's some giggles because you know what I'm talking about. Somebody in the world that doesn't have Jesus, somebody that doesn't know, hey, I don't mind being around them when they're miserable. When you're around a Christian and it's just miserable all the time and all that, where's the joy in that? Why would anybody want to be a part of that? In this right here, Paul is struggling, man. He don't know where to go. He don't know what to do, and he knows he's out of control of it. But he knows that his being set free, even for just a little time, because here's the thing where Paul is in this time. He can be let out. There's no law that says you're free. There's no law that says you can't be accused of this again. There's no law that as soon as he hits the street and he goes back to preaching, he goes back to planting churches, he goes back to sharing that joy, that they can't lock him up again. It could be a very short time that he's out. But he knows that it will lead the Philippians to boast in Jesus all the more. And that's why he writes, for to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. See, I wonder why in our time, in our place of where we are, when did a fear of death become such a great thing? I really wonder that a lot. We think back in the Victorian age when nearly every family lost children, spouses. They all died at home. The wake was at home. The funeral was home. Back then, they were used to death. Today, maybe it's because most people die in hospitals. Some people have never even been with someone when they died. Poll after poll, if you look up polls on what do Americans fear, it's over and over and over that it's the biggest fears are dying and public speaking. Ernest Becker, who wrote The Denial of Death, he's quoted in one of these, he says, the idea of death, the fear of it, haunts the human animal like nothing else. Another author, Francis Bacon, said, men fear death as children fear the dark. Church, I ask you today, should we fear death? Is there a difference between fearing the process of dying and fearing death itself? I got stuck right here when I was writing this, because I started thinking about just this church body. I didn't think of anything outside of it. I wasn't thinking about anybody in my family that's died. But I started thinking about the people that have died in the 6-7 years that we've been attending this church. Not just those in the last two or three that have been on staff or however long it's been, but I go to thinking about being there to watch people walk through the processes of dying. Some dealing with immediate deaths, unexpected deaths. Some watching things that they knew that there's things that are happening that we don't know if it's going to come or if it's not. There's the chance of healing. There's the immediate the stuff that just shocked everybody when they died. Then there's the ones that walk through a process over time. And I think about the pain I saw within those people. I think about the things that come with that. And then I got to thinking, it's got to be normal and natural to fear dying. I don't want to burn. I don't want to drown. I don't want to be trampled to death. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to shrivel up to nothing. So is there a difference in that fear of dying or in that fear of death? Because you see, Paul in this wasn't talking about dying. He was talking about what's going to come for him. See, Tim Keller that I quoted early on, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. While he was diagnosed with that, he was working on a book. It was called On Death. This is how he begins the book. It says, death is the great interruption, tearing the loved ones away from us or us from them. It says, death is hideous, frightening, cruel, and unusual. It's not the way life was supposed to be, and our grief in the face of death acknowledges that. Death is our great enemy. More than anything, it makes a claim on each and every one of us, pursuing us relentlessly all our days. When people die, we grieve. We have trouble sleeping. We have trouble eating. We have trouble thinking. We cry. It's okay. Jesus cried at the grave of his friend too. But you know what King Solomon said? Ecclesiastes 7:2. He said it's better to go to a funeral than a party. The exact words are, it is better to go to the house of mourning than go to a house of feasting, because that is the end of every person, and the living takes it to heart. See, it shouldn't shock anybody in this room that the death rate is still 100%. And the living should take this to heart. Yet Paul's greatest longing was to depart and die and be with Christ. Why? Because to depart, in that sense, means we'll be free of this evil world that is broken by sin. Don't know why that skipped that. Technology. Revelations 21:4 says, it says, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. What's that mean for us? No more cancer. It means no more cold sores, no more depression, dementia, death. No more saying goodbye, anxiety, brain tumors, sprained ankles. No more shame, no more wasp bites, no more embarrassment, no more regret, no more addiction, no more tears, sadness, no rage, no school shootings, no more abuse, no more divorce, no more abandonment, no more tornadoes, typhoons, not even an ingrown toenail. And no more sin. Not even the temptation to sin. Can you imagine what that would be like? So that difference between that process of dying and death. Where should we live in that? Where should we be? We think about all these mighty things of heaven. We think that we're going to have a bunch of questions for God when we get there. I can guarantee you we won't, because we will be in the presence of the answer. 1 Corinthians 13:12 says, "For now we only see a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known." 1 John 3:2, "Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is." We will be united with our loved ones. We will be with Jesus. Those things Paul wrote, notice he doesn't talk about going to heaven. Heaven is only heaven because of who is there. I can remember in youth one time downstairs, I had somebody ask me if I think that our loved ones are watching over us from up there. I really don't think they are. You know why? They've seen Jesus. He's way more glorious and interesting than us. Those ones that have been taking us from this earth are they're in heaven. They're in glory. They're there with Jesus. They're healed 100%. Really makes me wonder why we want to fear death so much. I know it's that missing, that yearning to be with somebody that you can't talk to day anymore, those changes. D.L. Moody once said that one day you're going to read that I've died. He said, "Don't believe a word of it, for that day I shall be more alive than I've ever been." We often think this is the land of the living, and really, that when we die, we go on to the land of the dead. This is wrong. We're the land of the dying. We're all dying. In 100 years, there won't be one person in this room here walking in this church. And that's going to be bad because they're going to be hot because Tom ain't going to be here to fix the AC. But we're eternal beings. The tin of our body will wear out and die, but our souls will live forever. When our life is here, we go to the land of the living, a place of eternal joy that the Bible calls heaven, or we're going to a place of eternal hell that the Bible calls hell. Eternal torment. John 11:25-26, right in there it says, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die." Tyler, y'all can come. Man, I've watched what some of you have gone through. Been part of what some of you have gone through. Been right there beside of what some of you have gone through. We got people sitting in this room today that are going through it right now. The fear of the unknown, the fear of what is God going to do with your life, the fear of what that healing is actually going to look like. Is that healing on this earth where we're set free from an illness, or is that healing from when He takes us and makes us completely whole? Where's that difference? It has sucked to watch some of you go through what you've gone through, no doubt. Today, I want to close my part a little bit different than normal. No altar call, no prayer for me over the church. We talked last week about how it should or could look to act out the live as Christ part. Today, we focused on the die as gain part. I think to fully understand chapter 1, verse 21, we've got to continue reading to the end of chapter 1. But I don't think it's a place to spend a whole 2 or 3 weeks on. I encourage you to go home after I read it. It's not going to pop up on the screen. If you've got your Bible, go ahead and open that up, read along with me. If you've got a Bible app on your phone, whatever you've got to do. If you don't have either, just listen. You see, this is what Paul did when he found himself between a rock and a hard place. Starting in verse 21, he says, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I am to live on in the flesh, this will mean fruitful labor for me, and I do not know which to choose. But I am hard-pressed from both directions, having the desire to depart and be with Christ, for that is very much better. Yet to remain on in the flesh is more necessary for your sake. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with you for all your progress and joy in the faith, so that your proud confidence in me may abound in Christ Jesus through my coming to you again. Only conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or remain absent, I will hear you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel, in no way alarmed by your opponents, which is a sign of destruction for them, but of salvation for you, and that too from God. For to you it has been granted for Christ's sake not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, experiencing the same conflict which you saw in me, and now here to be in me." Just ask you this morning to just sit and be still right where you are as the worship team closes. If you're here this morning, you need immediate prayer, I'm just going to, not that I don't want to pray for you, but I just want you to find somebody beside you. I want you to find somebody in your row to pray with. You can come to the altar, you can do it right where you're at, or you can just simply sit and you can think. But I think our focus this morning, what are we going to do with life and death?
And there's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. And there's a place where streams of grace flow deep and wide, where all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. It's at the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you, yes, I'm in awe of you, where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you, yes, I owe to you, Jesus. Yes, there's a place where sin and shame are powerless, where my heart and peace with God and forgiveness, where all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. You sat Yes, I'm in awe of you, where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. Yes, I owe all to you. All to you. Yes, I owe to you. Yes, I owe to you. Yes, I owe to you. Yes, at the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. Yes, I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. Yes, I owe all to you. Here, my hope is found. Here, on holy ground. Here I bow down. Here I bow down. Here, arms open wide. Here, you saved my life. Here I bow down. Here I bow. Here, my hope is found. Here, on holy ground. Here I bow down. Here I bow down. Here, arms open wide. Here, you saved my life. Here I bow down. Here I bow at the cross. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. Yes, I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. Yes, I owe all to you, Jesus. Yes, here my hope is found. Here on holy ground. Here I bow down. Here I bow down. Here, arms open wide. Here, you saved my life. Here I bow. Here I bow at the cross. I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. Yes, I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin was. Yes, I owe all to you. Yes, I owe all to you. 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 Yes, I owe all to you, Jesus.
Woo! Right before the service starts, Kurt comes up to me and I'm like, hey man, I got to go early. You want to handle the announcements? I've never done the announcements before. And meanwhile, Bronk looks over and he goes, and you know how Bronk, he doesn't wear glasses, but like a grandpa looking over the top of his glasses, he does that look. He looks over and says, it's going to be a hard one to follow. I did not know what I was in for. Who just found that message, found weight, kind of heavy? Show of hands. Is that one a little heavy? It's great that you feel the heaviness. However, I don't feel like that's what it was intended. It was intended to be enlightened to this perspective, that it's not supposed to be heavy. Just like you see this endless cord, one little speck on it is your life on earth, but that whole thing is your life. It reminds me of the quote that absolutely blows my mind and gives me a perspective, and it's kept ringing during this message, is we're not human beings that have spiritual experiences. We are spirit beings that get to have a human experience. And so when you take that perspective, you get the light of the message, and it's really a message of hope. Some people that bring hope to a lot of people that we may never get to meet are some visitors.